Ha-Seong Kim's injury on the Braves. He's expected to be out 4 to 5 months. They're replacing him with Jorge Mateo. What more do you make of this? It's a tough break for the Braves.
Obviously, Alanna, it's a big setback there for the Braves. They committed $20 million on a one-year contract to Kim to solve shortstop. They were very excited about that being the last missing piece of how they kind of viewed their team. And so obviously he has this injury. He's going to be out for months. And so for now, Mauricio Dubon will be the starting shortstop, at least initially. Yes, they did sign Jorge Mateo to a one-year, $1 million deal to give them some infield depth. He's got a lot of speed, can play a few positions. So that's how they're going to at least go into spring training. But we all have seen the Braves president, Alex Anthopoulos. We know how aggressive he can be. And so, look, I think he'll look at his team during the spring. They'll make a decision if they think Dubon can carry the load for the first 6 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, whatever it's going to be. And if not, we know what he'll do, right? He'll call Cleveland, or he'll call Detroit, or he'll look for another option at shortstop to bridge the gap until Kim gets back. But obviously a setback for Atlanta, not the way you want to start spring training.
Is there a situation where, as a GM, you would go, okay, this is the date that it makes it too late for us to be like, okay, now we're going to make a move, in the sense that he possibly could be coming back mid to late May, depending on how he heals from the injury? If it were July at this point, would you go, no, we need to fill this role with a true, proven big league shortstop and not a stopgap?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if it's going to be a half a season, I need to get another option. And then when Kim comes back, okay, I've got depth. I think because it's probably going to be 6 to 8 weeks, I can get by. But that being said, every GM is going to look for a better option than the option you have right now, regardless of who it is. I'm not picking on Mauricio Dubon, who's a very good extra player, but that's what he is. He's a guy that you like to fill in for a couple of weeks rather than a couple of months. And so, I think if you're Alex, you're going to keep looking out there, see what kind of options are out there on the trade front during the spring. And if you can pick up a better shortstop, someone in between Dubon and Kim, you're going to try to do that.
Jim, it sucks for the Braves. We just talked about Cody Bellinger. Have you heard anything on Cody Bellinger, on what his free agent? I mean, we've heard all the stories. The Yankees don't have bidding war. They've made their best offer. Who else is out there? And what would the Yankees possibly do if they lost Cody Bellinger?
Yeah, they don't have a panic pivot like the Mets did, right? I mean, when the Mets lost out on Tucker, they did the panic pivot and they overpaid Bo Bichette by $17 million a year, right? That option is not going to be out there for the New York Yankees. So if the Yankees lose out on Bellinger, Jason Dominguez and Spencer Jones, they're going to get their shot. They're going to get to compete in spring training, and one of them is going to be the starting left field of the New York Yankees come opening day. That's clearly the plan that New York has right now. But I still think it's likely that Bellinger goes back. He's been offered 5 years, $160 million with opt-outs after years 2 and 3. My understanding is the Yankees are willing to give a huge signing bonus as well. I think the offer that the Yankees have on the table is astronomical, especially when you look at his 6-year history. His history isn't like Alonso and Schwarber where it's clean. He's had good years, he's had bad years, been inconsistent. So I think this is a very good offer. Now, I understand that Scott Boras and the Boras Corporation and Cody would prefer a 7-year deal. So would everybody else. Schwarber would have liked that too, so would have Pete Alonso. But the market is what it is. I do not believe there's a team in baseball that has offered Cody Bellinger 7 years. I don't think that's out there. I don't think he's had an offer of 6 years. I could be wrong. And the one thing we know about the Boras Corporation, if the offer's out there, he'll take it. He won't be afraid to take that offer because he'd love to be able to go back to the Yankees and say, you wouldn't go 7, I found 7. He loves doing that. That being said, I don't believe the Mets are in outside of a short-term AAV on him. Toronto is not in on him. The Dodgers are not in on him. I don't know, honestly, of another team right now besides the 2 New York teams that are in on Bellinger.
Looking at how the team's constructed and the fact that they made a big push for Tucker, and I think Bellinger's way more versatile than Tucker. Why are the Blue Jays not in on Cody Bellinger, do you think?
I think it's the risk with how he's going to age with the swing. I think it's the risk of we saw him fail in Chicago, and a year ago the Cubs had to eat part of the contract in order to trade him to the Yankees. They had to eat it. The Dodgers, he struggled there a couple of years. They moved on from him. I think that, Mark Shapiro, the president of the Blue Jays, Ross Atkins, the GM, looking at his history and saying, what is the risk? If we were to sign him long term, what's the risk? I think, quite frankly, the Blue Jays kind of view Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger similar the way I do. I would have been fine giving Kyle Tucker 10 years, $350 like the Blue Jays offered. I kind of feel like Bellinger's not that kind of player for me. I think there's too much risk. Now, I love him defensively. He can play all three outfield positions above average. He can play first base above average. I love the power. I loved his MVP season with the Dodgers. I loved his season last year with the Yankees. I loved one of his seasons with the Cubs. But where was the rest? And I know we're blaming injuries and we're blaming the pandemic, but, other players didn't have that problem of lack of consistency. And I don't want to get stuck on a 7, 8, 9, 10-year deal on a player that I don't think I can count on producing most of those years.
Jim, let's pivot now to pitching. Not a lot going on, at least it doesn't seem very public, going on with Framber Valdez. How is he still out there, and where do you see a landing spot for him?
Yeah, I think Octagon has done a really good job of keeping the negotiations of Valdez quiet, nothing leaking. I actually like it. I think it's good for Framber, to be honest. The reason he's still out there is I think when free agency started, they were looking for a 6 or 7 year deal for him. He's not going to get that. He's 32 years old. I'm not sure he's going to get year 5. I think he will get 4 years. But, the offers haven't been there like expected. And so when those long-term deals aren't there, the agents these days have to take a deep breath and then figure out, okay, how short of a deal can I get? What do the opt-out clauses look like? Am I okay doing a 2-year deal, opting out and going back in the market next year when I'm not tied to draft pick compensation? You've got to be creative and try to figure out the best way to handle this. Now, I know the Orioles have been in on Framber Valdez the whole time. I've heard the Mets had interest if it was a shorter term deal. Not sure if Framber is there yet. But besides that, I've not heard Framber's name connected. I think the Giants should be all over him, but I've heard they're not because they don't want to spend that kind of money towards pitching. So, besides that, I can't tell you. I still think the best spot for him right now is the Orioles or the Mets. I think both teams need him if they want us to cover that team in October, either one of them.
What's hurting his market more? The draft pick compensation? Because I felt like that was, more the $50, $60 million range, and he's clearly a 9-figure type of pitcher. Or is it the fact that a guy like Freddie Peralta, who everybody probably views as a better pitcher than him right now, is still technically out there?
Yeah, I think everything factors in, right? I think being 32 years old factors in. I think there are some analytic groups that don't like the hard hit rate against Framber, although it's mostly ground balls, and it doesn't worry me as long as you have a really good defensive infield. I think some people are looking at him and saying, he used to be a 1, now he's a 2. And so I want to pay 2 prices, not 1 price. So I think all of those things kind of factor in. What are the other options that are out there on the market? That being said, he's a difference maker. I think he could take a pretender and make them into a contender. So I think he'll find a home, but I think we're going to find out it's going to be one of those shorter term, high AAV with opt-outs.
Jim, we just saw Ranger Suarez sign with the Red Sox. Have the Red Sox done enough this offseason? Because that, Bregman was kind of the guy they thought they flipped and went, and they went Sonny Gray. They went Ranger Suarez. They obviously have Garrett Crochet. The back end of the bullpen, they brought back Chapman. Do they have enough offense to win this division with the way they've lined it up with their pitching as strong as it is?
AJ, my opinion is they need a second baseman or third baseman. They need one more bat. Obviously, they wanted to bring Bregman back. They weren't going to play Bichette at the kind of numbers Bichette ended up with. So I think that a player like Eugenio Suarez makes sense for them if they can get him on a shorter-term deal. Power plays in that ballpark. He can hit 6th or 7th in the lineup and hit that occasional 3-run homer. I think that makes sense. Circling back to Arizona to see if there's another way to trade for Ketel Marte is something that makes sense for them as well. I know at some point they'll have Marcelo Meyer back. They like him very much, but I think they need one more bat, whether it be at second base or third base.
You've mentioned the Mets twice with shorter term, higher AAV. What is that line for the Mets in the sense that they're just going to have, okay, we're going to stick with it, but at some point they're going to look up and go, daggone it, we're paying everybody $40 million a year. I get it. We're rolling over like, USC football. We just roll over every player every other year in NIL money. But what is that line? What is that line for the Mets?
Yeah, so for Steve Cohen, he has unlimited money. He's the wealthiest owner in baseball. And look, if he wants to take losses, he writes a check and he can write it off against his hedge funds. So I think he just do whatever he wants. I mean, we've heard the stories about him seeing a piece of art for $20 million and he decides he wants it. He writes the check and it goes in front of his house. He's doing the same thing with baseball players. And look, I wish, in my years as a GM, I wish I had an owner that was willing to just give me a checkbook and say, go spend whatever you want. And $47 million for Bo Bichette, my goodness gracious. But they got the player, which was great. It was a great panic pivot, I thought. And he was wondering what color smoke it was. When he found out it was Dodger blue, he went, okay, I'll go get Bichette then.
Wow. Yeah. Uncle Stevie, he nails it. All right, so let's go to one of your old teams. You have a picture of the guy over your shoulder. Elly De La Cruz allegedly was offered the highest extension of all time, right, for any Reds player, and he hasn't accepted it yet. First of all, do you think he should? And when you're as a front office member approached a player, did you already think that, hey, man, this guy's going to accept this and save us money and also set his family up? What's the deal with the Elly extension?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Nick Krall and the Reds did the right thing by offering him over $250 million and said, look, we want you here. We want you to spend your career in Cincinnati. I think you have to try to make that effort, whether it works or doesn't work. When you're represented by the Boras Corporation and you're a position player and you're young and you have analysts telling people that he has the talent to be a future Hall of Famer, really tough to do a long-term deal because Scott Boras' long history is he will beat it on the open market. And I know when the Nationals offered Juan Soto $450 million, he turned it down and everybody laughed. And he ended up 3 years later getting $765 million. So he made an extra $365 million by saying no. Elly De La Cruz is going to do the same thing. So I understand it. And, it's pretty painful for a small market team like Cincinnati. I think for them to have a chance to sign him right now, you have to probably start the conversation at $350 million. To start the conversation to get it serious, I'm not sure Cincinnati is going to do that in the marketplace. So again, this is a talented kid. He hasn't reached his potential yet. We keep waiting for that breakout year, which I think may happen as soon as this year. It's going to be fun to watch, but keep in mind, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Reds in this marketplace when you're seeing the kind of contracts. Kyle Tucker gets $60 million a year. Bo Bichette gets $47 million a year. Shohei Ohtani gets $70 million a year. It's really hard to try to do these deals like the Braves did once with Ronald Acuna Jr. because these young superstars seeing this kind of money out there, it just doesn't make sense to give up the kind of hundreds of millions you'll be giving up if you sign now.
Jim, what did the Reds do? I mean, you said they probably need to start at $350 million. I mean, is there a certain point where they're like, what is the point? Because we know that he's going to go to free agency and there's not a dollar figure that we can do right now to extend him.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to be realistic in these small to middle markets. If we're not going to do a salary floor and a cap, if we're not going to let half of baseball compete for a world championship, if we've decided we're not going to do that as a sport, which is okay if that's what they want to do, then if you're the Reds, you have to do what Tampa Bay does and Miami does and everybody else does. You've got to enjoy your first 4 years with the player, and then you've got to call the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Phillies and the Red Sox and see what you can get for De La Cruz and at some point trade him. You don't want to wait to the last year. You want to do it with at least 2 years left so you get the most return you possibly can. But that's going to be the reality if we don't fix this system.
Is he good enough for the 350 potential? Yes, but really a lot of his analytic numbers are propped up by his stolen bases. I get it. He had the torn quad, and the second half was abysmal. First half was looking MVP-ish if there wasn't a Shohei Ohtani in the league. But are his numbers, based on the fact that his walk rate is what it is and his strikeout rate is astronomical, what do you feel like his value is based on how he has done, not what he could do?
Well, that's a great question. I think the value is probably pretty close to what the Reds offered him, which is why they tried to get it done at $250 million range. I think that's probably, when you look at it, that would make sense on a 10-year deal right now. Yeah, the potential is that, by the time he gets to the open market, he could be somewhere between Kyle Tucker and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think that's realistic, but he's not there yet, and you've got to see the development. So, yeah, and there's lots of risk in this. And remember, $350 million today is going to be $600 million when he gets to free agency in 5 years, based on history.
Jim, we mentioned Schwarber buying Schwarber and the Reds, and they had $300 million to try to give him. Where did that money go? Like, I know they tried to get it to Elly, and listen, it's a great PR move also by the Reds. Let's not forget that. And Scott Boras has never had a client turn down a $100 million offer and then not gotten a more. So a position player. So that's why one of the reasons why you said that he won't accept it is because he has a history of getting him way more, like you said. So, but where did that money go for the Reds? The Reds say, hey, we offered Elly the highest extension ever. Oh, he didn't take it. We tried. It's a great move, especially they just had Reds Fest this weekend. I mean, everyone's like, well, now they're like, Elly, take the offer, right? But where did the $300 million they had for Schwarber go? And they said, oh, it was just for that one player. Where does it go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, AJ. I asked the same thing of the Reds, as soon as they lost out on Schwarber, before the Orioles quickly signed Alonso. I was at the winter meetings, and I texted the Reds, and I said, why not just pivot and go get Alonso right now? Like, immediately. Just take the same money you had for Schwarber and put for Alonso. The way they viewed Schwarber's intangibles were such an exception. They felt like what he would bring to their clubhouse and locker room was such a difference maker that they wanted to extend for him. They didn't view other players on the open market similarly. And so that was their view, but it ended up being the intangibles there. Do they have money if they needed to commit $30 million to a player? The answer to that is yes. They haven't done it. I think if the right player were to come along, I think they would go back to the well and try to do that. But to do Schwarber, they weren't really going to add to their budget. They were just going to take their budget and, instead of spreading it out among 2 or 3 players, give it to Schwarber. And remember this about the Reds, and try not to smile or laugh. They paid Nick Martinez $20 million last year to be a 6th starter and long reliever. They gave him the qualifying offer and he accepted it. So they were taking Nick Martinez's 20 to put towards Schwarber.
I want to ask you if you think that the way that the free agents or players are looking at things now, Jim, has shifted from back in the day when you would take the guaranteed money as a young player versus what these, the high end of these free agency contracts are now. I mean, the eyes, I would imagine, are really big with something like an Elly De La Cruz seeing what some of these contracts have amounted to. Has that shifted and changed the dynamic of how these young players are going about it?
No, absolutely. If I'm a young player and I'm looking at the marketplace, I mean, I don't even have to play into my mid or late 30s anymore. If you're going to pay me $60 to $70 million a year, just give me 5 years in my prime and I'll have enough money if I want to retire or do something else. And doing long-term deals, we're seeing a lot of players that did the long-term deals, and those players are losing out. It's just the way it is. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr. and Guerrero came up the same time. One guy's getting paid $500 million. The other player's not getting paid, relatively speaking. So I think when you continually watch who does better, I think the young players, with advice from the agents, are saying, we're better off waiting unless somebody wants to overpay. And that's why in Elly De La Cruz, all he has to do is look at Juan Soto and look at Guerrero and say, do I want to get that result, or do I want to get what Acuna ended up getting in Atlanta? It makes it pretty easy to make that decision.
Jim, Hall of Fame voting tomorrow. Who do you think gets in?
Well, Carlos Beltran's going to get in, so that's great news for him. I mean, what an incredible career he had. But the guy that I've been pushing all these years that hasn't gotten in is Andruw Jones. And I'm just praying he gets in. It's going to be close. I think it could go either way based on what I'm hearing in terms of the voting. But Andruw Jones was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen in my life, and it's not close. And I asked the late Frank Robinson, who was a manager for me when I was the GM of the Washington Nationals. I asked Frank, who is the greatest defensive center fielder you ever saw? And he said, Andruw Jones is 1A and Willie Mays is 1B. And by the way, Andruw Jones has one less home run than Carlos Beltran. Both of these players deserve to get in. I hope tomorrow we can celebrate both center fielders. And by the way, I hope all the people that voted, I hope they spent the time to ask John Schuerholz, Bobby Cox, John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, Chipper Jones, David Justice, Fred McGriff, and any other Atlanta Brave that watched him play. I hope they spent the time to ask the visiting managers and GMs that were in the National League during the 10 years that Andruw Jones won 10 consecutive Gold Glove awards. I hope they asked those people if Andruw Jones is a Hall of Famer, because all of them would say yes. And it's a shame he isn't already in. But you know what? As long as he gets in this year, it'll be okay. So hopefully the voters did the right thing. And hopefully tomorrow on Foul Territory, you guys will be announcing Beltran and Andruw Jones.
I hope so, Jim. I got to play with Andruw, and he was a great guy. He's fun. Do you think, I have two questions on Andruw Jones. One, do you think that the end of his career hurt him, and that's why it's taken so long? Because he was so spectacular for those 10 years, and then he kind of just fell off a cliff, and I played with him at the end with the White Sox, and he was a shell of himself with their injuries. Do you think that hurt him? And then my next argument is, look at Torrey Hunter's numbers. How come he's not getting more love? He has, I think, 9 Gold Gloves instead of 10, right? And he has a lot of numbers that are better in a lot of other categories, except for, I think home runs he's like few behind. But other than that, they're all similar. But Torrey gets no love, and he was the best center fielder that I ever saw on a consistent basis. Obviously, I'm biased because I played with him in the minor leagues and came up with him, but he gets like no love, and his numbers are across the board very similar to what Andruw Jones did.
Yeah, so in terms of Andruw Jones, absolutely. His career, once he left Atlanta, whether it was Dodgers, White Sox, Yankees, hurt his career. And he kept playing, right? There was like a 5-year period after that. He had 10 years where he was a Hall of Famer. And then he absolutely fell off, and that was it. And I think those 5 years hurt him. I think a lot of the young writers that joined later saw those 5 years, and that's what's in their mind, unfortunately. I think the analytic and stat people end up looking at all the statistics, whereas if you just look at the 10 years in Atlanta, a 10-year period, there is no doubt he was a Hall of Fame player, and I believe that he should be voted based on that. With Torrey Hunter, I can't give you the right answer, to be honest, because I spent practically my entire career in the National League, and those were all the games that I saw in person. I certainly love watching Torrey Hunter on the screen. I don't disagree with the stats and numbers that you're throwing out there. Just for me, I like the people that vote on the guys that saw him with their own eyeballs during that same time period. And my 17 years as a GM, all 17 were in National League ballparks. And so I don't feel that I can give a good opinion on Torrey Hunter like I can on the guys that were playing in the National League.